It's a pleasure to start to discuss, especially with you, Minister Sengeh, with your hat of minister in Africa, in a country which is making progress, improvement in education, and your international heads as co-chair with myself of the Sherpa group of the High-Level Steering Committee of SDG4, as well as the representative of the international community and chair of the governing board, the GEM report. So, I will start like this: decades of efforts, decades of improvement for sure in education, the international community supporting countries, member states to make education a right for everybody, children, young people, youth. Still, we are here because we know we need to change and we need to transform, which is not simply reforming and making small adjustment to the systems of education. So my first question to you is, why is so important, is so urgent, is so critical now, as all the speakers in this opening session told us, to change, and to change dramatically, to transform. Transform means, as you all know, reshaping the form of what we are doing. So it's really very much about the ambition to leave the comfort zone, with a lot of implications, which are implications of about organization of education systems, with implications of relationship between constituencies, implication on financing, and making different priorities. This is what politics is about, actually. So, may I have your thoughts on that?
I think we are at a critical moment in history. Everybody is speaking about it, with the UN Secretary General, with the DSG, with the need for having transforming education. We're at a very critical inflection point in history, where if we do not transform education, our future is at great risk. I think we have many reports that have come out. You saw the report recently that came out about the 222 million children in crisis who need support in education. We have the Futures of Learning reports. We see the benchmarks from GEM reports that tell us about countries who are not going to meet their targets for SDG4. We have seen the learning poverty reports as well that's come. So there's data and evidence in our face that says we are in a moment of crisis. We've heard the world leaders tell us about that crisis. And as a minister on the ground, I see that as well happen. Just in Sierra Leone, we have about 300,000 kids in primary school level who are out of school. And this is even though we have the largest number of children in school at any point in time, nearly 3 million children, but yet we still have many more hundreds of thousands out of school. At the local level, we see that many children are out. Globally, with crisis all around the world, whether it was in conflict or climate crisis, there are children who were left out of school. We know that when COVID came, with well over 1 billion kids who were out of school. And the thing is, it's not just about poor countries. The need to transform education is for everybody. You speak to colleagues in Denmark or in Italy, the same way they learned 20, 30 years ago is how their grandchildren are learning. And when we speak about learning poverty being high, 70% in low and middle income countries, we also know that many of the countries in the West are not following their benchmarks. They're not going to meet SDG4. So it's important and imperative that we all know that it's a global responsibility that we can transform education, because if we don't, misinformation in the United States will affect democracies in Europe and Africa. Lack of education in Sierra Leone will affect what happens in France. And so we are really interlinked and it's our global responsibility at this moment to transform education.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm moving to more difficult questions. Let's pretend I'm a journalist. This is my dreamy life, maybe next life, we don't know. And I'm asking you, as a minister, as a politician in power, to use the language of truth, as you are doing, of course, in this beautiful house of human rights, education, science, culture, and peace. Well, I heard a little bit of, I would say a tension in our discussion, and we must have tensions, because if the discussion is not tough, it's not about change, as some leaders already mentioned yesterday in the conversation with the young people. And the tension is, in my opinion, about the urgency, the need to fill the gap, the awareness that 70%, according to World Bank, UNESCO, UNICEF data just released, will not be able to read and understand a simple test in the coming years, which is 20% plus than before COVID. And as you correctly put, COVID has been a big game changer. And it's a moral, ethical imperative to address this problem. It's about foundational learning, it's about basic skills, especially in the global south, but not exclusively there. And the second part of the job, this comes from the inspiring discussion we had heard in the opening session between especially Madam Salework, President of Ethiopia, Chair of the report on the futures of education, DG Azule, and all leaders who are calling for, not stopping here and now, but having the responsibility to be creative, to look beyond the limits of time and space we are living, beyond 2030, reimagine education. In other words, taking the opportunity that each crisis actually brings. So, how do you solve this tension?
I think we have to go beyond that urgency and translate that urgency into action. And for us to translate that into action, we have to take responsibility. I think the evidence is there. We are at a critical moment, we're at an urgent moment, but we have to take action. And not action into the future, we have to take action now. And taking action starts with taking responsibility. I think all world leaders, between now and going back into September, as we spoke about today at the high-level steering committee, we as ministers, 150 plus ministers, have a responsibility to let our leaders know that this is an imperative and that the commitments that they make in September must include transforming education. So the first is taking responsibility as world leaders, driven by all the ministers who are in this room. I think parents and learners also have to take responsibility, community, civil society. We need everybody to take responsibility of transformation, and that needs to happen now. I think the second part is, as Chief Innovation Officer as well for Sierra Leone, in addition to being minister, I must say I remain very impassioned about the power and potential of technology, hybrid technology. I think I've been saying from paper to the metaverse, somebody else said from pen to the spaceship. We need to deploy the power and potential of technology to help us to transform education. And this means we must begin to think beyond, we must really perhaps begin to think of this as a right to information, accurate information, the right to connectivity that's affordable and accessible connectivity. We must change the way in which we think about these enabling tools that exist to enhance learning. The second part, perhaps, to that is with financing, so commitments and taking action to financing. And finally, I think the power of the youth. Now, it must no longer be enough to have young people in the room. Having them at the table is critical, as we are beginning to have, but now we must give them a decision-making vote. I think this is the time where, when we're making decisions about young people, if a young person is not in the room, everybody should stand up and say something is wrong. Bring a young person in the room. Put them at the table, and beyond that, what we need to be advocating for, particularly as we speak about transformation, is that they need to have a decision-making vote. And in Sierra Leone, one of the things that we're doing is we set up a youth advisory group, and that youth advisory group will be put into law such that the young people are in the highest decision-making body of the policy-making of the ministry. And I think that's a minimum that we have to go for.
Is it a commitment? Is it a proposal?
That's a commitment, and I must say...
Do you agree with him? So, that's great. A first outcome of the pre-summit.
Thank
no
you.
meeting, no decisions without a young person in the room, okay? We agreed.
You know, I am happy that you held me to that. When I was at COP26 last year, I made a commitment that I'll set up a youth advisory group. We have done that. And now I am using this to commit that we will put it into law, that young people will be involved in the decision-making with education in Sierra Leone. That's a commitment.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. This brings me to another, difficult, tricky question, if you allow me. About young people, I was impressed last year. I had the privilege to be part of this Youth for Climate big event in Milan, in my country, leading up to the Glasgow conference. We also organized a side event, the Glasgow conference between Minister of Education and Environment, and so on and so. And about environment, we can say that young people are really, leading. It's because of them that the entire world, the leaders, had been shaken up, and they understood, they realized that now or never. Also because of them, especially because of them. Why in education we don't have a Greta Thunberg to do that?
I think there's, when I was younger, being an activist, and we advocate for young people to be in the room, as young people, we're happy to just be in the room. And we see that people like Greta, people like Kenisha, they're not just happy to be in the room. It's their right. It's their rightful place to be in the room. I think it's a framework of thinking fundamentally with education, and that's why we need to transform education. Because in the education system, we think about young people as empty vessels who come to sit in the classroom and the teacher imparts knowledge into them and they leave and go back out of the classroom. If your mindset is a young person comes, sits in front of a table and a notebook, opens it, and you put knowledge into their head, then you're not going to ask them to champion. You're not going to involve them in the decision making. I think parts of transforming education requires, which is happening now, thanks to UNESCO and with the SDG4 Youth Network. And I was sitting next to the youth envoy who is staying in to participate and has been championing the youth declaration. It is that we have to change our mindset around the thinking of this to allow the students to be part of the problem solvers. And in the video that was shown earlier, you saw that in the young people. They have the ideas. Everybody wants to go to a school like what they described. That's fun, that where the exams or the assessment is based on their learning and their memorization, where they feel safe. If we do what they told us to do, it'll be the best school that exists. Nobody will not want to be in school. And I think it's our framework, our mindset that needs to be shifted, and this is the right moment to do that.
Let's do that. We have the opportunity through the pre-summit and to the summit in New York. Thank you so much. So, really last question. Let's assume that from this pre-summit, you as minister, and I suppose all the other 150 and more ministers here will get superpowers, you know, like Marvel heroes. So you go back to Sierra Leone, you'll be a superpowered champion politician for time-bound period, of course. I don't know, can say 3 months, yeah, is enough to start to change. Which are the 2, 3 first things you will do, given the superpowers you have and you didn't have before coming to Paris to the pre-summit?
That's a very tough question. I
told you.
I think based on the conversation yesterday and with some of the work that's been happening, gender transformative leadership in and through education is important. I think we have to, and when we think about, certainly girls are important, but it's that we have to frame how we finance education to make sure that inclusion happens, the most marginalized. President Bill said the most vulnerable, the most marginalized, the most disadvantaged learners count on us. And so I think I will make sure that we're implementing that call of action is there, and in any community where the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, I think I'll do that. And the second part, again, is really what is a call of action from what happened, is what Kenisha said, like believe in magic and believe in young people. I think if we believe in magic and believe in young people, I do have a feeling that what you were saying about the movement, that what we were talking about, the transformation, it will happen. I must say something that was discussed yesterday is that we must bear in mind our privilege to be here. We're largely here because of our historic privilege and our existing privilege within the system. And the world has to be willing to change that system that continues to provide that privilege, which further moves us away from those who don't have. As an example, we wanted to bring a young person to this summit from Sierra Leone. Amazing young woman, really talented, but she could not get a visa. I wanted to bring a teacher to be here as well, but that teacher was first refused the visa, and when she went to the airport, they did not want to believe that her visa was real, and that we had to be here in the session and send a note verbal to confirm that her visa, which she was refused before, is real. And I think we cannot continue to be on these global stages and think that everything is equal and the system is equal. We as leaders have to change the status quo that continues to promote these inequalities, this injustice that exists in the world, because if we don't, we all suffer, we all lose out. And that inclusion that embodies, and I know UNESCO continues to drive it and all of us continue to drive it, has to be at the heart of what we do when we go forward. Let's check ourselves, let's check our privileges and acknowledge it, and see how we could promote radical inclusion and ensure that everybody else who is not in the room and at the table can come in there and have a voice.
I think he deserves superpowers, right? I think you deserve really. And just to conclude, let me join this global club of superpower champions just for a few minutes. I'm not anymore a minister. As former minister, I kindly ask you to allow me in the club. And if I would be part of this club, I would propose to the international community to move along the following 3 lines of change. First, from hierarchy to agility. All education systems in the world actually are still based on a very vertical way of thinking, how the classroom works, how teachers are approaching learners, how learners are supposed to approach teachers. This from the basic education to higher education. I come from a country where Maria Montessori, many decades ago in the last century, started to rethink this kind of model. And I think that now there are conditions to leverage this part of the work we are doing. So my first proposal is to move to a different agile system of learning and teaching. Second proposal is about, breaking the walls of disciplines like they are dictating the agenda of teachers, organization of the classroom or universities, and really taking a holistic approach to education and learning. I'm a professor of general linguistics, and if I will go back to the university, as I will do after this fantastic experience in my life, I'm not sure that I would bring all the knowledge, all the new understanding that I'm getting from this experience, because my discipline is about, fundamental science, linguistics, but I will have to stay in terms of publications, HR impact factor, and everything in this rigid system. So I think that moving from a discipline-oriented approach to a real holistic approach would help, the real world outside schools and universities have big challenges, and to face these challenges, to help learners to become really global citizens. I would say citizens of this planet now, because global citizenship may be something which is still based on the idea that there are boundaries, national boundaries to move to have a global dimension. Now is about the citizenship of this planet. And this is the second proposal. The last one, maybe the most difficult one, I don't know, but the most ambitious, and this is something which comes very much from UNESCO, and I'm so happy to support this vision. It's maybe time to move to the notion of right to education, to the notion of right to learn. Lifelong learning means that it's not anymore having a place and the time for learning, but learning should be really across all our life and also using different contexts of learning. What's happening for young people actually anywhere in the world now. So, if you allow me, Mr. Minister, as a temporary member of the Superpower Club, I would propose to bring these small pieces to the puzzle. Do you agree?
I was taking diligent notes, and I'm sure all the ministers who are here have taken notes, and I think we will add those to the things that we'll do when we go back.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. Thanks for listening to us.